Welcome to Bitcoin Amsterdam 2024. The Amsterdam interviews are powered by Bitfavo, and we're sitting here with Ian Reis and Mandana Yousefi. You're a couple.
Husband and wife.
Ramon, our producer, knows you longer than we do, but we met you yesterday at the Amsterdam event, and that was a blast, really. Yeah,
I had a blast.
Yeah, you had a keynote there, and you sat at a panel discussion.
I did on Nostr adoption.
Awesome. Yeah.
So you also, how would you say, you orange pilled your wife, but you also Nostr pilled? How does that go?
So the story is that I started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and I started wanting to tell my friends about it, and she would have me in the basement talking on the phone for like 2 hours, and she's like, "You can't do that. Like, no. I want my husband back."
I want my husband back.
And so,
what's he doing?
Cornered him at parties, for 3 hours. Someone would be in the corner talking to him about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And it was just not sustainable. And we wanted everyone to understand what Bitcoin was. And it's obviously not something that you can have in a 15-minute conversation. No. And I also didn't understand it. So
it's an ongoing process,
right? I actually remember there was a time when Ian was explaining to me UTXOs and the combining UTXOs or just cleaning them. What is that called?
Consolidating
UTXOs. And I was like, Ian, this is fascinating stuff. We should have a podcast. And he was like, no. And I said, no. We could have a podcast, and it could be you teaching me about Bitcoin, and it could be really
very helpful,
easy to understand for someone with my mind, not, these very technical Bitcoin podcasts that exist out there for people who are trying to ideate or solve all of those things.
But that resonates because listeners can resonate with you.
Exactly.
And learning on the way. So that's a perfect recipe, I think.
Yeah, and what we actually discovered shortly after we put the podcast out is it actually resonated outside of the United States.
That's even better.
Most of our listeners are not in the United States. Like 18-19% are in the States.
Why is that? Can you guess?
And are those English speakers or
not necessarily? No. People who speak English in other countries, but not English-speaking countries.
No.
Yeah, and so we started with Apple and Spotify or whatever, but right after we launched the podcast, Fountain launched.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think it was Oscar was on Twitter and was like, "Hey, we just launched this thing called Fountain. Any podcasters want to try it out?" I looked at what Fountain was. I was like, "We'll try it out." So our podcast has been on Fountain since pretty much day one. And what we learned very fast is that because it's Bitcoin and Bitcoin is international, then you have Fountain attracting Bitcoiners. So it's an international user base of podcast listeners. We just got access to people all over the world. I think our number one country that people listen from right now is like Bhutan. Or it's like Southeast Asia somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I would have never known that. No one listens on Apple. No one listens on Spotify. All of our listeners are on Fountain.
But why is that, do you think? Apart from that you're specifically addressing Bitcoiners?
So I think it's because Fountain created a product where people self-select themselves into this system. Mm-hmm. And so they've self-selected into, I'm a Bitcoiner and I want to earn money from listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
What that exposed by Fountain creating that product is that while there may not be a lot of Bitcoiners where you are, when you add them up in aggregate, you can get a decent number of people in an app like Fountain listening to your podcast where you would never even gotten access to them on Spotify or Apple without giving them a ton of money.
Yeah, Spotify is not going to boost up your discovery in their algorithm. I will say what I learned is that being a Bitcoiner is a very lonely experience.
Yeah.
Just generally, without meetups and conferences, oftentimes there's nobody in your own life.
That's correct.
That's right.
That's correct.
At minimum, your spouse should also be a Bitcoiner, right? So the idea of flirting with Bitcoin, I'm sitting with my husband, he's teaching it to me. There was also this angle of if you're married to someone who has Bitcoin, that's not your Bitcoin if you don't understand what Bitcoin is. And so, there were so many elements to the teaching of it. But I think a lot of our listeners tell us that they play it for their spouses, they play it for their families, they play it for their friends. They'll send an episode and they'll say, like, can you listen to this? Can we talk this through, to kind of try to orange pill people very gently. And at the same time, for them to be able to listen to like a very friendly conversation about Bitcoin, almost as if we're their friends. Because that's just not something that most people have. I'll say in our personal life, we don't have Bitcoiner friends. As crazy as that is, we still really don't. We do have some friends and family who are like, you know, for the longest time would say, can you just buy us Bitcoin? Can you do it for us? And we would say no. Now that BitKey exists, we've done that. And we've even put out an episode explaining that BitKey seems to be the way, that people are open to it, but they're not Bitcoiners. They're not sitting there wanting to talk about.
They might own a bit of Bitcoin, but they're not real Bitcoiners. No.
But for me, it's a surprise in our podcast journey is that people want educational content in their own native language, but it seems that with you, it isn't important.
Well, again, judging from those numbers that I see, I imagine that English is the second language of a lot of these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I will give Spotify credit, which is they recently put out a product where they like translate your podcast into other languages.
That's amazing.
So that might convince me to go look at them again, but I'd rather just pay like a Bitcoin service that'll do the translation for me, right?
I think it's a matter of time.
So
it is.
like the language barrier, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you are in the world, English is kind of the default language for let's call it higher levels of the internet, right? But I think what we're seeing now is that that's kind of changing, because the Bitcoiners, who are probably going to be the wealthier people in the coming generations, they are not all centered in the States. They're not all centered in English-speaking countries.
Right.
And just looking at El Salvador, like, I think the majority of Bitcoiners are going to be Spanish-speaking people, and because it's solving problems for them first. So people
the emerging markets are the first.
Exactly. And so people who listen to our podcast, if you look at the stats that I've been looking at over the years, it's literally countries that are having the problems that Bitcoin solves. That's our listener base. And we see it happening. Like Brazil pops up when Brazil has a problem, or Indonesia pops up.
Argentina.
And I'm like, what's going on in Indonesia? Then you do a quick Google search, Indonesia and Bitcoin. You're like, oh, that's what's going on. Okay. So like when the individual groups of people find out, and they come to an app like Fountain, for example, they have our quote unquote ad sitting there that's like flirting with Bitcoin. That sounds like a very friendly way to start versus get all your money off the exchanges and run for cover because it's all coming like that's not
Bitcoin or dumb.
That's not
a
a
win.
win.
If that is a podcast name, no knocking your podcast, but not for me. I would not listen to that.
But even the same friendly name with us, Connecting the World, it's just about connecting and explaining and lower the barrier to non-Bitcoiners to enter the space.
Exactly.
And talking about business ideas, you guys founded NextBlock. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on what NextBlock actually is? And then we will dive a bit deeper.
So the very short version of NextBlock is a Nostr client with a built-in business model. That's the best way that I can describe it. I feel like a lot of Nostr clients don't have a business model besides donations, or it's an open source project, so contribute in code. But at NextBlock, we have a business model, and we're calling it the Attention Marketplace. And the way the Attention Marketplace works is that you, as a person who uses Nostr, can opt in to into the Attention Marketplace. And if there's an advertiser that wants to show you an ad, because you've opted in, they can show you the ad.
And obviously pay a bit of sats for it.
The thing that I think we're bringing to this idea that is very unique and we could only do with Bitcoin and Nostr is that it's an actual marketplace. So you, the person who's using Nostr, gets to set your price. So just because you opted into an Attention Marketplace doesn't mean that you're going to see an ad. You could set your price at, I'll watch your ad for $10,000. Well, no one's going to show you an ad, right? But I believe that with a marketplace mechanic, we will find the market clearing price for attention. And just like we have the price of Bitcoin that we all watch every day, we will create a new market, which is the price of attention that we can all watch every day on both sides, people who want to sell their attention and the advertisers who want to buy it. This is something that Google, Facebook, all these companies, they do this. They're doing this on the backside. They just don't share the information, the data with us. It's not an open, transparent marketplace.
No. And it's not opt-in.
And it's not opt-in. It's definitely not opt-in.
Non-consensual.
No.
And so the idea of the attention marketplace is it's not just for NextBlock, right? So when you're opting into this attention marketplace, we're actually modifying your kind zero record. And that is signaling to the entire Nostr protocol that you've opted in to this attention marketplace. And any other developer could use that same information to integrate the attention marketplace into their app without needing to ask permission. It's a permissionless ad network built on Nostr and Bitcoin.
So this also could be an interesting feature for or a use case for a web browser.
Everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah, because there are some web browsers that are using some kind of model for attention marketplace, but with a different token. We're not going to mention it, but I think it's the proof of concept is there. Do you believe that because you are already testing, or is it does it exist already?
So the idea exists as a prototype.
Yeah.
The way that we're building out NextBlock is a low time preference layered approach.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're at Bitcoin Amsterdam right now is to come talk to the Bitcoiners and the Nostriches and pitch this general idea to them and see if they're even remotely interested.
Yeah.
From what I've seen in the past day and a half, they're definitely interested. With that information, we now need to go build out this marketplace that will enable people to price their attention.
Yeah.
If people are willing to come in and set their price, now we have one side of a marketplace. We have the sellers. We then go to the buyers. We go to the advertisers and say, hey, we have these people. They've opted in. Let's talk about what it's going to take for you to put your ads in the network. Now, the advertisers that I've talked to, it's not a lot, but it's a few.
We just got one waiting to come up here to record.
Yeah.
Someone just said they want to advertise on NextBlock. So
that was really cool, pre-interview conversation. But the idea is that we are trying to find what everyone's concern is without fully committing to this whole idea.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think a lot of Bitcoiners can actually do. Like if you have a stack of Bitcoin and you're kind of anticipating cycles and bull runs, you don't have to rush out to get money from investors. You can take your time and build an app that you want to build and only put your money in when you've crossed certain thresholds that give you the confidence to move on to the next level. And so that's the approach that we're trying to take with NextBlock. And I was telling someone earlier, I would have never said that sentence if it wasn't for Bitcoin. Like low time preference and building out and no, the game was always you go get VC money and then you figure it out later.
Yeah.
But when
3
you
years in, all right, let's figure out how to make profit.
Yeah, exactly.
We want to day one make money.
Yeah.
We believe that with this business model, day one we can make money, and then also we can show that proof of concept that this can work for other apps.
Yeah.
And this can fund development and growth without outsider funding that can then influence how things are developed.
Yeah. So you have three groups: the users, the buyers, the advertisers, and also other developers that are working with developing apps or something.
Yeah. So the way that we're structuring this is that we're calling it the attention marketplace, but the technical term for the developers out there is the promoted note network. And the promoted note network allows people, developers and non-developers, to participate in various ways because there's different integration points that you can come in to the promoted note network. So you could stand up your own ad agency that just sells ads and places them in the network. You could build your own client and then include the ads in your own client. You can create your own ad viewing experience. Maybe you want to have gamify it or something, whatever you want to do. It's a permissionless ad network. So whatever you choose to do with the ad, once you've pulled it out of the network, that's up to you. The only thing that's the most important part of that is that once the person has watched the ad, they get paid the price that they asked for. And if you don't accomplish that goal, then you've actually failed at your job of integrating. And that's going to be the hardest part of building this out.
Yeah, and you guys are planning to use Bitcoin and also to decentralize attention and data. What unique opportunities do these technologies bring, and what are they key to the future of social media?
Oh, I have to answer like the non-technical person. Well, I think the really interesting thing to take a step back and to understand like the existing social media, legacy social media, as we want to call it, was created when neither of these technologies existed.
No.
So now that we have these two technologies, which is the ability to be able to directly send someone payment like this with Lightning, we have that. That's on Nostr right now through Zaps. But to be able to do that after someone sees an advertisement, that's the Bitcoin technology.
Yeah.
With Nostr, we get the ability for someone to have and own their own social identity, own their own social graph. We're able to create a social media experience that we want. So on NextBlock, it's going to be a very specific social media experience that we think will work, that will be enjoyable for people. But regardless, if people don't like it, they can just take it and go somewhere else.
Yeah,
it's like a very low risk to hop in and just test it out. And for us to say that, yes, on our experience, we have these feature ideas for this idea of a digital real world experience where you step out on your block. There's only a finite number of people that will be on your block. You'll see their content. You then walk more. You go out in your neighborhood. That's a self-selected group of accounts that you want to be able to see. You can then hop into other people's neighborhoods, see what experience they've curated. You can then hop into a city. That's the relay experience, seeing all of that. You can hop into the wilds, which is outside of the city, which is just anything posted on Nostr. That's how we want to do it. And so that's the experience that ideally or realistically most people will have when they first come onto the promoted note network or the attention marketplace. But if they don't like it, they can go somewhere else. And for us to be able to offer that, making it very low risk, and if someone else likes our idea, they want to take it and build their own, that would be great, because that would just further expand what the attention marketplace can be, what the promoted note network can actually offer. And so that can only happen with Nostr technology, with the Nostr protocol.
But it's also low risk, especially also for the advertiser. I mean, if you're spending millions of dollars on advertisements that people don't like or people don't want to see, it's just basically throwing away your money, your hard-earned money. Well, you could argue if that is, but okay, you throw away money. And now that you know, and obviously there will be some people that are just grasping of or connecting ads just to earn some sats. That there will be also a group of people who will do that. But I think it's you can easily targeting your audience, right, as an advertiser too.
Yes, and also I believe that advertisers that advertise in the intention marketplace, automatically there'll be a positive association with those companies and businesses, because they're saying we respect you.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's the thing.
We are not a fan of this existing model. This makes more sense to us, and hopefully, and
not harass you with stuff you don't want to see,
exactly.
right?
Exactly. And I think like specifically talking about the early adopters of NextBlock, that audience is going to either be Bitcoiners or they're going to be new to Bitcoin, right? And they're going to need businesses in the Bitcoin space that can help them like advance in their Bitcoin journey. And so it's advertising does not have to be this negative thing. I need to buy products and services as a human being. And if there's a company that wants to participate in an open and transparent intention marketplace, I would rather do business with them. And so I see that to also be where it goes, where all of this happens.
Well, the social media platforms rely on a large user base and advertiser relationships, of course. How does NextBlock's plan to scale its attention marketplace while maintaining transparency and avoiding the pitfalls of the traditional platforms? I was also thinking, this is a nasty question.
Ian, this one's for you, man.
I got a feeling it is.
I want to add one thing. If you don't share any data, then how interesting is it for an advertiser if you don't know you're shooting into the wild and you don't know as an advertiser if someone could be interested in your product?
So this is funny because this is one of the two questions that everyone's like, well, what about this, right? The way that I like to explain this part of the problem space is, first of all, we have to understand that advertisers are not in a good position either. That's right. Advertisers get taken advantage of by Google and Meta and Facebook as well. So right now, they're forced to play that game. And the game that they play is, well, Google or Meta or whoever says, we can target this ad for you because of surveillance capitalism, right? Okay. So with NextBlock, the idea is, and I was saying this to somebody earlier today, think of when you opt into the marketplace and you set your price, that is like your floor. Like you cannot interrupt my day for less than 1,000 cents, right? However, I do have some demographic data that I've entered, and you can buy that from me as well. And what I'm considering is that that'll be like a premium, right? So an advertiser can come in and say, well, I'm willing to spend 1,200 sats to buy some attention. Well, you're not going to get the demographic data for anyone who set their premium at 1,500, but you will get them for their basic information. We at NextBlock, if we can show that to the advertisers and say, look, if you want to advertise to everyone on the platform, it's going to cost you at a bare minimum this. But if you want to get all their demographic data and be able to do that targeting, it's going to cost you more because that's not our information. That's not our data. You have to buy that from the people. And this is something that, as we were working on NextBlock, I was really trying to drive home the point to one of my friends when he was saying, oh, well, Twitter does this and TikTok does this or whatever. And I was like, they're all the same. Right? They're all doing the same thing. They all have the same business model. They just convinced you that they're doing something different. And when we were writing our manifesto, I came up with this concept called the chaos cartel. They're corporations harvesting attention on social media, right? The chaos cartel. And the name fits because we see what social media has done unregulated and uncontrolled over the last, 15 years. So they are spreading chaos, and we should not let people use the different company names to make it sound like there's something different going on. They're all doing the same thing. NextBlock is actually the alternative to that. Nostr with no ads is the alternative to that. But jumping from Instagram to TikTok, you've just changed the Lord of the Manor, but you still have to play by the Lord's rules. The NextBlock approach to advertising in the attention marketplace is that all of your information belongs to you, and we would like to enable a way for you to sell it to an advertiser and get the most money out of that information to you, while also at the same time recognizing that advertisers do want to do that type of targeting, but they need to have a transparent way to control their spend, right? So maybe I want my ad campaign to run for 30 days and I can't afford all the demographic data. Well, you got a decision to make. Do you want to put more money in or no? And I don't think Google allows them to make that option. Google is just like, you got to pay, and maybe the person that sees it.
And they're operating on an assumption rather than voluntarily offered data. I mean, how often have you seen an advertisement that you're like, why are they showing me this?
Yeah, that's right.
Or they're showing me something that I own.
Already. That own already.
It's a company that I hate.
You always have to.
Whereas on NextBlock, you have two options. If you're seeing an ad from a company that you hate, you make money off of it, get on with your day, or you say, I don't want to see this an advertisement from this company again. And you do not have to see it again. How often on these other apps do you? I'm some of them have this option of saying, I'm not interested in this. Don't show me this.
And they
again.
keep showing you.
Showing it to you. Exactly. So it's
money talks, right?
I think absolutely criticize our idea as much as possible, but I think it is really important to understand that the existing social media experience is pure chaos and no one is truly enjoying it, and advertisers are also being exploited just like the users.
That's absolutely right.
They don't necessarily even know if people have seen their stuff. At least on NextBlock, they get a receipt.
Because you have the two questions about personalized advertising or not personalized. That's the one thing that Apple asks when you install an app. And I can imagine, well, I want to see the personalized, but I am not going to do that. But with NextBlock, perhaps it could be more interesting. And I always, I also understand the side of the advertiser. I'm personally also a wedding photographer. So I know that if
Edward is harassing people with his photographic skills.
No. We're advertisers
not
too.
advertising at the moment, but I saw how it works. Of course, we also train other photographers. And if I want to know that they're interested in or are a photographer or then I need that information. Because otherwise, now with Facebook, it's just,
you're throwing away money.
I think through an exploitative model, like a lot of us have come to this point where we don't want to share information about ourselves. And I think it's really interesting because Nostr, the first thing that most people are telling us at the Nostr booth is, this is about privacy, right? And we're like, it can be. You can make an MPub and have no email. You can do, you can treat it like you're treating your social media, but you own your own data, and you can really understand how all of these systems have been operating and exploiting you, and you can take ownership of that and take advantage of what social media can actually do, which is build a community and help you make proper connections. So if you are a business owner or you're someone looking for employment, use this network, put the accurate information in there about itself so that it can serve you. We just don't live in that reality right now. So more and more, we're like very close hold with our data.
So then it's more important and interesting to have a user base that is non-Bitcoiners, because they know what privacy is mostly. And the other ones think, well, I've got nothing to hide. Well,
I have said that so many times.
Yeah,
I really don't feel like, I don't have anything to hide. I just, I'm so sick of seeing ads. I'm so sick. And we don't even know how often we see ads. I ask people
some
this.
ads are so beautifully filmed and photographed.
Great. Yes, if it's a good advertisement going live, that's great. But I don't think we know if do we see ads every minute, every 3 minutes, how often we scroll. We have no idea. At least on NextBlock, tied to the Bitcoin blockchain, every time there's a new block, that's when you'll see an ad. And I really think about the future where if you have the attention marketplace on a lot of different ads, everyone collectively knows when there's a new block. And it's a heartbeat for, wow, I've been on the internet.
There's also Bitcoin mining. I mean, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I think I've been on my phone for like 30 minutes. I need to get off. Whereas right now, none of these apps want to remind you how long you've been on it.
No, that's right.
Well, Ian, Mandana, thanks for your time. Really interesting project you have.
Thank
I'm
you.
really curious about the future. One thing I wanted to ask you, because we're now at Bitcoin 2024. 2024. I said it a lot of times today. What are you guys hoping to get out of this conference?
So for me,
VC money.
No.
Not needed.
For me, we said this on the podcast before we came here.
Yeah.
I was really interested to come here and like tell this idea literally to the Dutch, because the Dutch are so like matter of fact and are just polite about something, but they'll be like, no, that's not going to work.
We're
They're
direct.
very direct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, they're very direct.
And
That's a bad idea.
And that's how our Ramon producer kind of developed. But I like the directness. And so I have no problem with going out here and saying, hey, this is my idea. I went into a room full of nostriches and said the word ads. Like, I think that was crazy in and of itself.
You had a couple of questions there that were difficult.
No one threw tomatoes at me, though.
No, that's right.
So I took that as like, okay,
It's
cool.
intriguing.
It's good to go to the next step, right?
Yeah.
But what I've learned from coming here is that because the Dutch have said, okay, that's a valid idea. Like, there's not too many holes to poke in that. As long as someone can opt out, cool. Now let's go to Latin America and try to do that same thing again, right? Because while we're building this, I'm trying to get everyone to tell me all the holes that they see. I want people to poke holes in it, because with the idea of everyone being able to integrate, I want to make sure that everyone that might integrate, their concerns are at least heard.
Yeah.
And I can factor that in when I'm sitting on the couch at night with Mandana talking about how NextBlock is going to do X, Y, or Z. I'll be like, no, but that guy in Amsterdam said, or that guy in El Salvador said. So that I'm just information seeking.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a very simple to explain business model.
It is. It really is.
Now, give me the questions about that simple business model, so then we can add the complexity later.
Well, I hope we helped you a bit with these questions.
Everyone did.
I'm very curious about next year, because then a lot can happen.
Yeah.
So we
keep in touch.
Yeah.
Keep in touch. Join nextblock.com. Follow us on Nostr, NextBlock on Nostr.
And we're not on any other social media.
Yeah, we're not doing this anywhere else.
I'm going to search you on TikTok.
I'm not making a Twitter account for NextBlock. I'm not doing
They'll
that.
disable it.
Yeah.
They'll turn it off. They're not gonna let that go viral.
I don't think so either. Okay, thanks for your time, guys.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.